Good evening, Clarence Williams. This is another edition of Now and Then. Today, I want to talk to you about two different concepts, two different positions, independent or dependent. Why is this so important? And why am I talking about independent versus dependent? Because it presents two totally different positions. And depending on which position that you are in, you really controls the shots. You control the cards. You control the situation. You control the meeting. You control the conversation. You control the activities. If you are independent, you are in control. And if you are negotiating with a person or a company or a country that is dependent, that country has a weak hand, regardless of the principles, regardless of the values, regardless of the circumstances surrounding the importance or the urgency of the negotiation. If you are dependent, you have a weak hand. And so the question is, do you want to be independent or do you want to be dependent? Let me give you a sense. Uh, there are people that are independent that still need help. That's not a dependent person. Everybody needs help. Everyone needs help. So if you are independent but you still need some help, then that's okay. You can deal with that because you have to get yourself to a point where you can then exercise your independency. Now, if you are just want to remain dependent or you want to continue to receive help from someone, then it turns from help to credit. If you need help, you are independent and you need some help, that's help. And then once you get able to stand on your feet again, then you cease to receive the help. Then you are independent. But if you get to a point where you prefer to receive the help, even though you may not need the help any longer, you still continue to receive the help, then you become independent or you become a creditor. And once you become dependent, or once you become a creditor, then the one that is furnishing you the credit is the one that controls the shots, that has the cards. It's the one that decide what happens and what's going to happen, the terms, because you have put yourself in that situation. It could be from a parent in a child relationship. Child has grown up and the child is out of the home, but a child is still requiring or asking for help from the parents. And even though the child now can have the ability to go on and be independent, they are so uh, reliant on that support or that help from the parent that they themselves become a creditor. And once they become a creditor, then it is the parents, the independent, that then dictates the terms, dictates the events, dictates the mood, dictates what is going to happen because they are the ones that are supporting you. They're the ones that are giving you the funds. So if you want to break away from that, you have to become independent. That can go from a personal relationship It could be a man or a woman that having just, they're not married, but they just have a relationship. But either the man or the woman, one, it doesn't matter what sex it is, anyone could be independent or dependent. The one that is choosing to receive the help, even though they no longer needs the help, become dependent. They become the creditor. And once you become the creditor, then you don't dictate the terms. Then people have a tendency to start treating you any kind of way. So if you want to stop that, then you have to become independent. Is that uh, is that hard to do? Is that difficult? Is that going to cause you some problems? Is that going to cause you getting up earlier in the morning, going to work, saving your money, being wise, uh, having some sense about what you do then, controlling, you know, uh, uh, managing your life, managing your funds? It's going to cost all of that because that's what independents do. They accept that responsibility of managing. So we have so many dependents that don't want to be dependent, but they lack the proceeds, the resources that come from the independent. It doesn't matter whether you decide in your mind that I'm independent or not. If you are receiving funds, if you are a creditor, you are dependent. Now let's go from personal to a state. The same situation occurs. The government, by law, by decree, by ordinance, provide some funds to the states. And in that sense, the states are dependent on those funds coming from the federal government. And since the state is a part of the United States of America, by right, they deserve that. They look for that. The government is obligated. Those funds comes based on the laws that are being passed in Washington, D.C. So if Washington, D.C. passed the law and then the government then have the obligation to fund uh, those laws by giving and supporting states. So that you're independent as far as a state is concerned, but you still have some dependency because maybe there are some programs that you don't really have the funds uh, to, to sponsor or to fund. And so naturally, since the government has passed the law, your congressperson has uh, went and fought for those funds, and then now those funds are flowing. Child care is one that comes down from the federal government. It don't come directly to you. Don't does not come directly to the facility that your child is in, but it comes to the government of the state. And then the government of the states then funnel those funds out throughout the programs that they have established within their local government. One big thing that has always been since Obamacare came into existence was whether the states individually are going to offer Obamacare, Medicare to so many different people. Some of the states say yes, and they received the funds down, and then some states said no. Florida was one of the states said no way, we're not going to receive it, and so that left a whole lot of people off of from getting access to those funds because they couldn't go directly from the uh, through bypass the state government and go to the federal government and say we want the funds. No, Congress passed the law, Obamacare was passed, but it had to be funneled down through the state's government, and then the state government through their programs that they distribute those funds goes out into the community. Development block grant, that's another one. Development block grant comes down from the government, federal government, but it goes to the states, and then the states through their programs farm those out. Head Start is another one. Head Start is a federal program, but it is funded down through the local government, and then the local government funnels those funds out. These are just a few things, but the government, local government, is still independent. But then there are some countries, going from state now to countries, that they are independent, but they still have a great dependency on the United States of America for funding, which in essence makes them dependent. That's why we have the tariff war, because Donald Trump has said, you are dependent on us, and so we are calling the shots. Now, if the European Union, if Canada, if Mexico, China doesn't have a problem because China is independent. You know, they're just doing a trade, which is business. But the United States, Donald Trump does not want to keep importing. I'm giving you the sense of why the tariffs exist now. Donald Trump does not want to continue to import things from Canada, Mexico, European Union, China, anywhere else. He wants all of the majority of the products and the materials that America used to be made in America. That's his position. Now, if you go back to the 1900s or the 19th century, that's okay. You're in the 21st century now. That's a totally different ballgame. We are a global world now. We are so interconnected. But he's trying to turn the clock back to when all of the majority of the products was being made right in America. Now that's a good concept. It's a good idea, but it just won't work. And he tried that during his first term, and we had to bail out the farmers. And now you can see what he's doing. He is tanking the stock market. When I say the stock market, I'm saying the financial arm of America, the money arm of America. Everything works based on the GDP. That's the gross domestic product. America, we are dealing with purchasing domestic items. Gross domestic product. That's the GDP. And the stock market is part of monitoring or measuring how successful we are. That simply means that if you're going and you continue to spend your money, spend your dollars, then that means that everything is going smooth. But when you start pulling back from spending your dollars, then they start looking to see, the stock market people start looking to see why you won't spend your dollars. And that determines whether they are investing or whether they are selling off. Donald Trump created that market where people, citizens, are growing reluctant to spend their dollars. And once you keep doing that, then there are economists and people that just analyze data all the time from a standpoint of commercial spending and paying and all of this kind of stuff. They can analyze it and they can see the trend and they can say we are headed for a recession. But what Donald Trump said is, listen, even if it caused a recession, we are going to continue to do what we are doing because we have to make America great again. And then he says it's going to cost a little, a little pain, but it's going to be worth it in the end. Well, again, if you are willing to suffer the pain, you can take that from a going all the way back to a personal position. If the parent is willing to suffer the pain as the child out there on their own and just say, I'm not going to give you any more money. You're going to have to make it on your own. That's the same thing Donald Trump said. And so now you have to suffer the pain. That's the same thing the federal government is saying to the states. We're not giving you any more money. You're going to have to suffer it on your own. That's the same thing Donald Trump is saying. He is saying, I'm going to put so much tariffs on imported items that it's going to make it too expensive for China, for Mexico, for Canada, for the European Union, or any other country outside to send or to ship their products in because it's going to be too expensive for them to do it. Well, if it's too expensive for them to do it, which is what he's already did now with the steel and aluminum, the steel and aluminum companies in the United States now, they are doing business because it's cheaper to do business with them, United States companies, than it is to get outside steel and aluminum from Canada because it's too expensive. Without the tariffs, the United States companies was too expensive. And China, not China, well, China also, because China is the main culprit of this whole thing with steel and aluminum. They just dumping all of this cheap steel and aluminum, which is causing the problem. But the United States companies versus Canada companies, Canada steel and aluminum is cheaper. And so the United States companies was not competing because they were not able to compete with Canada. But with the 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, now the United States companies can compete. But now what is that going to do? That's going to make all of those appliances, all of those cars, and all of those things that is made with steel and made with aluminum go higher. Because now, in order to produce it, you have to, companies have to buy that steel from United States companies. That's the way it is going to be with everything. Now, Donald Trump said everything's going to come down. Don't believe that. He said he's going to bring the price of everything down on day one. And you believed it and you voted for him. Now he's telling you that that's going to make everything come down. Don't believe that. I just showed you. United States companies is going to charge you more to produce their products. If it was going to bring things down, that simply means their products would already be lower than exported products. Now that makes too much sense for you to overlook that. If the steel in the United States was already lower than Canada steel, why would a company go and get Canada steel? All they would do is buy United States steel. But it is because United States steel and aluminum is higher that companies are going and getting Canadian steel and aluminum. So even if the trade war ends or the tariff war ends with United States producing more, we will still be paying more because it's going to cost the United States companies more to produce it. So you're not going to go down, you're going to go up. But Donald Trump keeps saying you're going to come down. And people believe that. It's amazing how people just believe everything. Just believe everything. But let me get back to dependent and independent. The companies that are now tit for tat with Donald Trump over the tariffs are dependent companies, are dependent countries. They made themselves dependent by depending on the United States. There are 193 countries that make up NATO. The first time Donald Trump became president, the first thing he said was that countries need to pay their fair share. Now, they're not really pegging into NATO. What he is saying is that they need to invest in their own national security. And how do you invest in your own national security? By beefing up your military, by the budget that you assign to pay for military expense. In these countries, I'm not talking about, all 193. I'm talking about those countries that could do it. Uh, European Union, uh, Canada. These are the ones that he's specifically talking about now. They were paying less than they needed to pay. Why? Because they was dependent on the United States of America. And the United States was paying it and then also assisting them with their security while they were taking their money and doing everything else with it. Now, they should have learned this from the first time Donald Trump was president. But what they did not know was that Americans was going to re-elect Donald Trump. No one envisioned that. They just thought we are rid of this guy. But what was happening, I've already showed you, in segment, does this make sense? I've already told you why that happened. And it is still happening. People are losing their jobs. People that voted for Donald Trump are losing their jobs. And they still believe him when he says that he's going to make America great. Yes, they are complaining at the town hall meetings. Yes, they're marching in the streets. Yes, they're griping and crying. But you wait until the next primary comes and see what they do. They can talk all they want, but the next primary they're going to still vote Republican. The next general election, 2028, they're going to still vote Republican. Amidst all of this crying, they're going to still vote Republicans because you're still going to have people out there lying to you and you're still going to be believing it. And that's just the way it is. But these countries just figured out, listen, there is no way Americans is going to vote this guy back in. So we don't have to go any further with our uh, national security expense. We're going to leave it just where it is. Donald Trump was reelected. And the first thing he did, he said, listen, you need to pay your fair share. You need to stop sending all of these products over into the United States. I'm going to put a tariff on them if they come over here. And here they are. You know why they got themselves in this position? Because they were satisfied being dependent. Now they're talking about go to the table and negotiate. If you are dependent, excuse me, if you are dependent, you are at a weaker position when you are negotiating with an independent, especially when the independent is the one that you are dependent on. The only thing that will stop Donald Trump is not the rest of the world. They are dependent. They can talk a big game and they can woof like Mr. Ford did over in Canada. He gonna slap a 25% tariffs on the electricity of Michigan and those other 3 or 4 states that's closer to Canada, only to have to back down when Donald Trump says, if you don't, I'm gonna put 50% tariffs on you. You don't bluff when you're talking to an independent. If you are dependent, don't bluff. Don't bluff. Don't bluff. You have to be independent to bluff, not dependent, because all the independent person has to do is call your bluff because they know you are dependent on them. And that's what Mr. Ford did. He had to bag down. And he said he bagged down because all he wanted was a meeting with the officials of the United States. Isn't that sad? And so now all of these countries, European Union, I've been to Europe. I've seen the beauty of that country. But when you start looking behind the scenes and pulling the curtains back, these countries are in trouble. You have the big three, the E3, Paris, Italy, and Germany. And pretty much in the European Union, they pretty much control what's going on. And you know, Great Britain pulled out of it with Brexit. And I told you that what was going on with that. Donald Trump wanted to weaken the European Union in the first place. And that's what he did. That's why he was in favor of Great Britain pulling out of the European Union with Brexit, because that weakened. And then now, listen to this. The European Union say they're going to maintain, they're going to hold together. Great Britain stepped up and said, we right there with you. Now, since the tariffs has been put on European Union, do you know what Great Britain said? Well, we are not going to reciprocate tariffs. We're not going to stand with the EU now. We're going to stand by ourselves and we're going to try to negotiate with Donald Trump. That's a weak position. And not only is that a weak position, it's the divide and conquer. And the more countries, states that can be pulled away from that European Union and make their own independent contract with Donald Trump, the more weaker the European Union is going to be. The only way you can deal with an independent, even if you are dependent, is through strength. You're in a weaker position, but you really weakens your position when you start fracturing yourself. So, conclusion, do you want to be independent or do you want to be dependent? If you want to be independent, then start paying your fair share. Start accepting your responsibilities. Start getting up, going to work, making your own money, spending your own money, and start weaning yourselves off of your parents, off of your loved ones, off of your wife, off of your husband. Yes, off of your wife, off of your husband. You can still be married and still be an equal partner instead of a dependent partner in the relationship. If it's a country or if it's a state, yes, you're gonna need the government because that's what the government is for, to help you with programs to enhance the lives of your citizens that's in your state. That's part of it. But you should still be able to function independently. So that's a good thing. No problem with that. If you are a country, stop asking the United States for handouts. Get what you need, and when it is no longer needed, stop getting it. Get to a place where you can drive your car by yourself instead of having to ask somebody else to help you drive your car. There are so many rich minerals in all of the whole world. I look at Africa. Africa is so mineral rich in every place. Oil, diamonds, gold, everything. Sapphires, all kind of jewelry. But the governments of Africa have allowed foreign foreign countries to come. It has weakened. And now when they need something, they are so fractured that they can't even work together. And so therefore you have to rely on a power like the World Health Organization, WHO, for some type of humanitarian relief, doing a disease or doing a pandemic, doing a storm or uh, uh, weather related thing, because you're so fractured you can't make decisions on yourself. You created a dependency on the United States, and then now the United States tells you what to do. This is now, this is then. If you want to be rid yourself of it, become independent. Clarence Williams.